Hi class, my name is Amanda Russell and I chose to study gender interactions in the preschool classroom. So there are a few reasons why I chose to study this. The first one is that one of my sources explains why it's important to understand micro level interactions in the preschool classroom or in children's interactions um, to fully understand child development. So I think that includes gender interactions, and the way that genders interact does have to do with child development. And observing this can tell us a lot about how children develop. Second of all, I observed just because of my own curiosity, especially with the progressive and feminist movement rising. I thought it would be interesting to see how children responded to this and how they were affected by it. Originally, I had hoped to address that more in my paper, but I had to narrow it, and so I chose not to include that this time. But I think it would be interesting in a future study to see how the feminist movement or progressive movement directly affects children. And lastly, I believe it's important for teachers to understand gender tendencies, gender interactions, and gender preferences because teachers are facilitating learning and planning activities. It's important for them to understand how the genders interact with one another and how they can motivate and engage the children in learning. So I observed at two play-based preschools for 2 days, and I collected data and then also just observed the way the genders interacted. So in order to understand, well, first of all, the questions I wanted to answer was, do the genders play together or do they tend to play in their own gender groups? And how do they make their decision? So do they make their decision because of they don't like the other gender or because they don't like the activity the other gender plays? So first of all, I looked at the question, do the genders play together? And so basically how I measured that is I made a graph, so with 4 titles, so boys, girls, mixed, and alone. And I watched children who left an activity and were joining another. And if they joined, I looked at what gender they were too. So if a boy joined a boy group, I would put B under the boy title. And if a girl joined an alone group, or if she played alone, I put G under the alone title. So through doing this, I was able to see what gender groups the genders joined. Sorry, it's a little confusing. But you'll see a clear graph in my paper. So through observing this, I observed 53 total interactions, or total children joining different groups. And I observed that, and the data shows that 50% of the boys and girls that I observed joined groups of their same gender, which is really interesting. And it also shows, the data also shows that boys and girls are just as likely to play alone as they are to join groups of a different gender. So through that data, it was pretty clear. It inferred that boys and girls tend to play in groups of their own gender. So then I looked at the question, why do they play in groups of their own gender? What's the reason for that? So that's when I took a little chair around the preschool, inside and outside, and just watched how the genders played together. I watched if they did play together, what was their interaction like, and if they didn't play together, how did they seem to feel about each other, basically. So one example that I have is I was sitting beside one of those horizontal tire swings, and there were 2 boys on it, swinging very rambunctiously. I was a little nervous, and they were just being really wild, almost falling off. So I was watching them, and all of a sudden they decide, oh, we need a third person on here. And at that time, a little girl was running past, going somewhere else. And they yelled at her and they said, hey, come play with us. We need another person. Come play with us on the tire swing. And she looked at them, and she was thinking, and she walked over, and she almost agreed to get on with them. And as they started swinging wilder, she kind of squinted her eyes and said, no, thank you. And she ran off to go play on the sandbox with one of her girlfriends. So I thought that was very interesting because that showed that she didn't mind they were boys. She minded that how they were playing, and she didn't want to do that activity. And one of my sources, it talks about how girls tend to prefer calmer play, while boys tend to prefer wilder, rougher play. So that was very interesting to see. So after collecting this data, after doing both of these, I kind of realized that boys and girls choose what groups they join, not based on gender necessarily, but more so based on the activity the gender is playing. So I found this very interesting because it shows that they don't necessarily think negatively of the opposite gender, and they seem totally fine with playing with the opposite gender. They just had a strong preference toward the activity that was being played. And I found this very, very enlightening. So I found this is important because it's important that teachers understand how the different genders like to play as he or she is planning activities and learning for the classroom. So one thing that might be beneficial as teachers plan activities through knowing this information is possibly incorporating both girl stereotyped activities and boy stereotyped activities into one activity. So maybe instead of just having activities that are either calm or having activities that involve more running, maybe mixing these so that both genders can be totally engaged because there's parts of it that they both really enjoy. So that might be a very good way for teachers to facilitate both gender interaction and learning in the classroom. So yeah, that's the research project that I did, and it went very well. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to studying it more in the future.